The glass of Sundari's dome held the moonlight, like a breath held too long. It gathered the reflection of distant stars and the pale swathe of night, and pressed them in soft curves above the sleeping city. It sealed in the neg blue of streets, the bone-white avenues, the low-hummed throb of generators, beating in the bedrock. In that manufactured night, the dust of a battle still hung, too fine to see, enough to taste, the grit of scorched dura steel, and burned propellant and the faint rasp of something older. Violent decisions hardening into a future. Bo-Katan's boots made clean, measured sounds on the causeway. She walked with the balanced grace learned in years of armored life. Helmet cradled under her arm, face bared to the synthetic breeze whispering across the canal. Around her, the remains of Death Watch patrols clattered out of alleys, and to attention, and then away again, summoned and dismissed by the sudden new order of things. Her night owls kept station at her flanks, matte blue plates scuffed and blackened, T-visors turned outward. No one spoke. Every step tasted of her sister. She could feel Satine in the quiet, the pacifist duchess who had tried to turn Mandalore into a garden of glass and law. She could see her in the bands of light that curved along the city's interior horizon, in the clean lines of bridges and towers, in the soft steps of civilians who had been told for a generation that they were done with war. And in the hollow where a voice used to be in Bo-Katan's memory, there was the new iron weight of a different man's voice, low and edged and amused, reverberating in the chamber where he had taken the darksaber and the throne in the span of a heartbeat. He should have been dead. She had wanted him dead. And yet here he was, sitting in their father's chair as if he had been born to it. A witch of the Outer Rim. She tasted rust. She tasted resolve. "Clear the bridges," she said. Soft. Casca passed the order to the others, and the night owls flowed outward. Bo-Katan paused at the edge of a long window, a pane of the dome that looked down over Sundari's central square. The statues of the old warriors cast dark spears across the empty plaza. The banners hung still. Kryze, Ren, Saxon, Vizsla, all the names that meant more than law to a Mandalorian, even now. She ran her thumb along the rim of her helmet and felt the tiny scuffs and micro scores where fire had kissed it tonight. The helmet gave back its neutral chill. The chill steadied her. Behind her, the lift sighed open. Rook cast came first. Crimson mask, crimson plates, the new paint still wet in arcs where it caught the light. Gar Saxon followed, the long arrogance of his stride broken only by the formal bow to her station. He had been pre-Vizsla's creature, then the creature of whoever held the whip. He would pretend to kneel as long as it advantaged him, then sell what he pretended to protect. "Lady Kryze," Saxon said, careful with the old title. "The Prime Minister requests your presence. The Regent also." "Do not use that word so freely just yet," Bo-Katan said, not turning. "Mandalore has had enough regents to last a lifetime." "The throne is occupied," Rookcast murmured. "Titles follow, like hounds." Bo-Katan looked at their reflections in the glass. Rook's visor was an unblinking wound. Saxon's was a hawk's skull. Her own bare face was the only human shape among them, pale and composed, and in the ghosted pain, for a heartbeat too close to Satin's. She nodded once. "Then let us hear what the occupant intends," Bo-Katan said. She lifted her helmet and sealed it to her head. The world narrowed to the pure geometry of the T. Her voice took the filtered edge that armor gave it. "And let him hear what Mandalore will and will not endure." They crossed the square beneath the domed sky, their steps measured, the city listening. Doors clicked, and eyes watched through the fretwork shadow of shutters. The guards at the palace gates did not know how to hold their weapons yet under these colors. They did not know whether their salute belonged to her, or to the demon who had carved new lines in their future. Bo-Katan accepted their hesitation as attacks, and passed through it, untouched. The throne room smelled of ozone and old metal, of oil in the stones. Almec stood at the side like a piece of used machinery being polished for the fourth regime in his career. Around the circle of the chamber's high walls, the super commandos kept their vigil, crimson and black. The lights were low. So the throne seemed to float above an indoor dusk. And on the throne, he looked almost comfortable. The dark saber lay across his knees, that wound of night, with a white edge, a blade that had sung an old song tonight. His horns were small and ridged, like the broken teeth of planets. His eyes were amber, holding a kind of patient heat. He had been a weapon, and had been made into one again. She could see the scars of that making in how he did not lean, how he did not shift to find relief in the body. Pain had written lessons into him, and he had learned them all. "Lady Kryze," he said. She stopped an exact distance from the foot of the dais, and removed her helmet again, because there were still rituals even here, and even now. The air on her face took on the faint scent of iron. She held the helmet in her hands, light as a skull. She lifted her chin. "Maul," she said. One of Rook's fingers flexed on her rifle stock. Saxon's visor tilted a degree, listening for a tone. Almexi's eyes flickered between them like an accountant already tabulating his next lie. "If you call me that," Maul said, head angled slightly. "I must call you Bo, and not Lady." "I am fine with Bo," she said. "But you will not call yourself Mandalore, and you will not call me your subject." A murmur, barely the scrape of a blade being thought about. Somewhere high in the room a tiny piece of glass ticked as it cooled from battle. Almec stepped forward, oiling his voice. "Lady Bo-Katan, the solemnities." "Quiet," Maul said. He hadn't raised his voice. He hadn't even looked at the Prime Minister. Almec stilled like a hunted animal. Those eyes returned to Bo-Katan. He offered her a thin smile, and a thin piece of truth in it. "Words are a net. We have no time to be caught." "Then hear me without net," Bo-Katan said. "I will not see Mandalore ruled by off-world syndicates. I will not see our children drag spice crates through the domes to feed your shadow collective. I will not have civilians executed in the square because they remember a duchess you murdered in this room. If you mean to sit in that chair, you will abide by the law of clans. A council will be formed, and it will have the right to say no. You will not garrison off-worlders in our capital. The forges will be guarded by Mandalorians and worked by them. And if you think to bleed us to buy weight for your other wars, you will discover what it is to drown in Beskar." "Now." "Strong demands," Saxon said, and then caught himself. "They will not be demands," Bo-Katan said, without looking at him. "They will be terms. If you prefer blood to terms, we can spill enough to remind the sands beyond the dome." "How to drink?" "Da." Maul's smile lived a moment in the reflection on the blade. Then, it faded. He set the darksaber aside without ceremony and without relinquishing the gravity it gave him. He leaned forward, hands steepled, horns limned by the room's distant lights. "You would rather kill me," he said, and there was almost a kindness in how he acknowledged it. "It would be simpler. You would stand in the red wash, and you would feel you had saved your sister twice. But you have walked here with your gun still asleep. You are a woman who has counted the windows and the people behind them." "Memsal." "I do not have to like you," Bo-Katan said. "I have to choose for them." "And what am I to choose?" Maul asked. Mild. "I am a foreign devil with a local sword. I have offended your sense of the story. Yet I can bring you what you require, fear from without, layered into a shield. Fear from within, refined into obedience. Is that not the work of a ruler?" "Mandalore is not ruled by fear," Bo-Katan said, steady. "We are ruled by oaths that bind heavier than fear. You can sit in that chair until the clans tell you to stand. Not longer." "Bam." "Ah," Maul said, as if they had arrived together at something he found beautiful. "You propose a leash. I propose a treaty," Bo-Katan said. "Pull too hard, and it snaps. Use it wisely, and it leads you where you need to go." He regarded her in silence. She felt, and resented, the way those eyes could search for the seam in a person and lay a finger there. Bo-Katan held his gaze, as she had held the line tonight, when Vizsla fell, when her world left its old orbit and took a new one without her permission. "Very well," Maul said at last. He lifted one hand, and the super commandos sharpened. "The Shadow Collective will withdraw its cargo from Sundari within 2 days. Only Mandalorians will keep the keys to your forges. The prisons will open to release those who are not a danger to the city. There will be a council. I will sit on it. It will advise, and I will listen. And when war comes, and it will come, I will direct it. This is not a people that can survive by patience. Your syndicate soldiers stationed in the maintenance tunnels will leave within 2 days, Bo-Katan said. Your lieutenants will conclude their business with Black Sun and the pikes outside our airspace. I will give you escort to ensure they are not harassed in the withdrawal. In return, the night owls will protect the palace, and the city, and the roads to the farms. Civilian tribunals will be re-established. No more disappearances. Almec coughed politely, useful for once. If such changes are to be made, we should draw them up. We will write them after we keep them, Bo-Katan said. Words first with blood, ink later. The faintest of lines altered at the corner of Maul's mouth. He flicked 2 fingers, and the guard stood a fraction less like a drawn bow. You surprise me, Bo-Katan, he said. I expected you to die tonight. Screaming about honor. I am tired of hearing men speak for my honor, Bo-Katan said. Choose. Do we keep Mandalore together? Or do you have us in pieces so small you can hold them in your hands? He stood. He picked up the darksaber and let it hum once through the air, the old song low and promise bright. Then he deactivated it and hooked it along the arm of the throne. He descended the steps, each a small suture in the wound between them, and came to stand within 2 paces of her. He did not crowd. He placed himself where the terms of a duel might be measured, and he did not remove his eyes from hers. We keep Mandalore together, he said. For now. For now. She echoed. They stood too long to be comfortable, and exactly long enough to mean something. Then he nodded, and she inclined her head, and the room exhaled. Saxon's shoulders unlocked a degree. Rook's finger left the memory of a trigger. Almace's blood pressure returned to the realm where a medic could save him. Outside, the dome's lights changed almost imperceptibly, the city drawing its breath for morning. The treaty had not been written in anyone's tidy script. It had been braided in the space between her gaze and his, bound with the threat implicit in every man and woman in that room. Bo-Katan understood its fragility. She turned on her heel and walked out with her night owls, and the throne room opened behind her like a mouth closing. In the hall, Casca asked privately, on a closed band. Are we doing this? We are not kneeling, Bo-Katan said. We are buying time. From the devil. From whoever will sell it cheapest, Bo-Katan said. And then, we outlive them. They took the lift down into the city. Work began like water finding low places. Orders to the forges. Orders to the docks. The removal of a Black Sun lieutenant from a warehouse near the transit hub. Polite and implacable. His crew allowed to keep their hands and their teeth because it would be remembered and would matter later. The unsealing of a facility beneath the university where pacifist counselors had vanished under Almace's version of order. Faces saw daylight again, bruised but breathing, astonished to be counted. The night owls moved from street to street, a blue recurring dream, and the city began to learn their shape and the difference between their violence and the other kind. Bo-Katan slept not at all. She stood under the forge's gantries and watched the sparks fall like brief constellations. The sound of hammers in Mandalore was a comfort vertebra deep, something built into infants' bones. She spoke with the chief smith about quotas and repairs and the supply of ore from the outlands. She took off her gauntlets and helped lift a length of durasteel into the press. The heat through her undersuit was a language. She was less tired when she came out than when she had gone in. Ursa Wren arrived with her visor tucked at her hip and her braid bound back in copper wire. She inclined her head to Bo-Katan because they had been girls together at dances that felt 1,000 years ago, and because they were women now in a world that might break them both and expected them to smile. Behind Ursa, a child with bright eyes peered around an armored thigh at the world with immoderate curiosity. Ursa's hand fell to the child's shoulder. Gentle, firm, the gesture of one who knew exactly what could be lost very fast. You made a choice, Ursa said. She bared her face because Bo-Katan had bared hers, because the old manners still had weight. The dust in the air turned Ursa's cheekbone into a blade. There will be people who call you traitor. There already are, Bo-Katan said. They are welcome to try and fight me for the title. Ursa's mouth wanted to be a smile, and did not quite manage it. Gar Saxon will not forgive being made to wait. Gar Saxon's forgiveness is a coin I will never have to spend, Bo-Katan said. What he wants is a leash he can climb. I will let him climb until he remembers who is on my side of it. And Maul? Bo-Katan looked toward the palace, as if she could see through stone and the melted angles of the windows. As if she could see him in his perpetual tension, the stillness of a predator who never truly rested because sleep had been a classroom for pain too many times. He will keep his word as long as it fattens his purpose, Bo-Katan said. We will set the table so that our purpose and his look the same when the plates arrive. And if he reaches for more than he has bought, we will take his hand. Ursa followed the line of that thing not yet made. A council table, names carved in it, a map. She nodded once. You will need the wrens. I will need everyone who remembers that we are not a flavor to be poured over galaxy-spanning schemes, Bo-Katan said. Open your lines to Kel Dabe. Tell the river forges to prepare. Quietly. We will be quiet. Ursa glanced at the child, who had begun to trace secret patterns in the dust. And we will be quick. When Ursa had gone, the chief smith brought Bo-Katan a flensing knife with a new edge, as if to welcome her to the work she had chosen. Bo-Katan turned it in her hand. The blade had a bright hairline along it, a poised danger so precise it was almost invisible. She remembered, absurdly, Satine teaching her to cut fruit with a palace knife in a kitchen, where palace knives were never used, Satin laughing at her clumsy fingers, and the way they wanted to be fists. She remembered the juice running gold along copper tile. I will try to avoid using this on allies, Bo-Katan said, dry. The smith tipped an acknowledgement and went back to the fire. She made the first council happen before anyone had time to decide it should not. Almec came in a hurry, with a folder trembling under his arm. Saxon arrived late and took an obvious seat. Rook Cast took a less obvious one and watched everything with a stillness that did not pretend to be politeness. Ursa Wren took off her gloves one finger at a time and nodded to someone not present. Two elders from the far dome sat with their hands folded, as if in prayer, and in truth, in readiness to cut someone's argument at the throat. A representative from the farms beyond the shield dome arrived with sand still in his seams and dust like pale freckles on his cheek. Bo-Katan stood. She did not sit until each of them had found where their gravities lay around the table. We are not listing grievances, she said. Grievances will have their own day. Today we do three things. Empty the prisons of those who were put there because they asked for the law. Return the workers in the forges to shifts they can survive. And open a corridor for the syndicate ships to leave our airspace with their cargo by tomorrow midnight. She did not say the words, act of good faith. They weighed too little in this room. Saxon laid his hands on the table and leaned forward. You propose letting goods leave that might be needed here. I propose not starting a shooting war over spice in our own streets, Bo-Katan said. The hands that carry those crates will be bought again by someone. I have chosen not to buy them with our children's blood. You are softening, Saxon said. It had a flavor of test. The city will remember softness. The city will remember whether their electricity stays on, Bo-Katan said. You will remember whether your soldiers have a place to sleep that is not a corridor. The wrens will remember whether their wives see them again. We are not performing. We are governing. Da. Rook Cast said nothing. She only shifted her visor a fraction, curiosity perhaps, or something darker. Almec began to speak about paperwork, and Bo-Katan let him finish, because he believed in the liturgy of forms, and because sometimes even forms could be bridges when they were not traps. They voted. They argued. They established how many names would be read at the prison gates that afternoon, and which of those names would not have someone to answer when called. Bo-Katan wrote the numbers on her gauntlet, where they could wear off on synth leather or on someone else's blood. When they filed out of the chamber, it was with the confused momentum of a river that had found a channel and was not sure who had dug it. Maul did not attend. He sent, instead, a precise report from Rookcast about the disposition of his off-world soldiers and the timetable for their departure. It was exact. It was soldierly. It was drafted by someone who had been told that the first person to make a mistake in this game would be remembered by name for the wrong reasons. Bo-Katan folded it and slid it into the inner pocket of her cuirass. She walked the corridors after, feeling the palace shift as if the building were conscious, a little tightening, a little relaxation, a change in how footsteps sounded on stairs. Power had a weight to it. Buildings knew. That night, she went alone up to a maintenance walkway threaded along the inside of the dome. The city spread below, a bowl of patient starlight. The desert beyond lay as a memory of open sky. She removed her helmet because she could not do the arithmetic of this view filtered. She pressed her forehead to the transparent curve, letting the chill soak into her skin. "You once said," she told the city that had raised her, "that I was too hard to love." The dome gave back only the softest of answers. Her breath, the pulse of the lights. "I cannot be softer, but I can be wider. I can be something that covers you from rain you do not know how to name." There was a ripple through the city's sound, an engine's pitch deepening. The echo of heavier repulsors. Convoys died in. The first of the syndicate freighters lifting from the subterranean hangars to slide along their prescribed corridor, their engines tuned to civility this once. She could almost feel the hands on the crates, the weight of them, the way those hands flexed when they were finally empty. She wondered which of those hands would find a blaster tomorrow, and which would find a cradle. Her comm chimed softly. It was Ursa. "They are gone," Ursa said. "This batch at least. No shots fired. No bodies." A black sun foreman spit near my boot and decided he enjoyed breathing more than making a point. "Benti." "Good," Bo-Katan said. "The prisons?" "The families are gathering outside the gates," Ursa said. "There is singing." Bo-Katan closed her eyes. "Keep a watch." "I am not a romantic, Bo," Ursa said, gentle and uncondescending. "I'm a wren. I know what comes after a song. We will keep the watch." Bo-Katan cut the line and opened her eyes. In the far-flowing grid of streets, a small river of bodies moved with purpose toward the sector where the prison stood. Lanterns, glow rods, a braid of light like a vein. She breathed in, and then she heard, very faint, very far, the overlayer, the hum of war's wings learning the city's name. Ships reconnoitering outside the satellite shield. Not Mauls. Not Pikes. Not Black Sun. Something cleaner, more precise. She knew that song too. The Jedi would come. Of course they would. It was an old rhythm. Call, answer. The Republic had heard that a demon sat in the Mandalorian throne, and the Republic was still young enough to imagine that it could save a people from itself. She put her forehead back to the dome and felt the first ache of what she would have to do. Her comm chimed again on the secure band that did not belong to her. She let it ring once, twice. She answered. "Bo-Katan Kryze," the voice said. A woman, young and not, the way flame could be both. There was dust in the vowels that had never belonged to the core. "Do you know who this is?" Bo-Katan smiled without kindness, because the night demanded honesty, and so did the woman on the line. "If I say Ahsoka Tano," Bo-Katan said, "will you admit that you planned to be the one who said my name?" There was a pause that allowed for an old kind of recognition. "It's been a life since the last time we stood in a room without a weapon between us," Ahsoka said. The calm, slender circuitry carried something like a sad smile. "I heard about your arrangement." "It is a treaty," Bo-Katan said. "It is a tightrope over a desert. The Republic is looking your way," Ahsoka said. "They will expect help to make sure they land on the right side." Bo-Katan was quiet. She felt the urge, automatic, trained, toward that old alliance. The Jedi had not been Satine. The Jedi had not been her or Maul, or any of those who would write the price in blood. But they had meant something once that was not merely a blade. They had been an idea with feet. "The Republic will come anyway," Bo-Katan said. "You should know that. They come to rescue us from the choice I made today. I do not regret that choice, but I will not let them make my people a staging ground for their rescue." Bah. "The choice you made," Ahsoka said, and there was the careful weight of the sentence. "To keep Maul in that chair. To keep Mandalore out of Republic chains," Bo-Katan said. "Choose whichever subject of the sentence pleases you more." "You know who is under the Chancellor's face," Ahsoka said. "Very quiet now. You know what whispers under the Senate roar. If you do not, trust me when I tell you that the Republic's hand is closing around its own throat." Bo-Katan exhaled slowly. The dome fogged a circle around her breath and then cleared. "Then do not bring their hand to my home," she said. "Help me make this corridor wide enough for Mandalore to walk a while longer. Talk to your people. Convince them to hold. Convince them to see that no one wins if there is a siege here. Not us. Not you. Not whatever is waiting under Coruscant's marble." Silence. Long enough for stars to reposition themselves by a fraction. Then Ahsoka said, "This is not the Bo-Katan I expected. This is the Bo-Katan I had to become the second my sister's body hit the floor." Bo-Katan said, and did not apologize for the violence of the image. "Tell them, Tano, if they march on my city now, they do Maul's work for him and the work of something worse. We will break, and something with a plan will collect our pieces." "Delay is not refusal," Ahsoka said, tasting the ethics of it as if it were ash she could not spit out. "I can try to buy time. I can argue. But when they come, they will come. And I may come with them. Then come to me first," Bo-Katan said. "In the palace, not the sky. We will walk and remember that there was a day we did not have to raise our voices over blaster fire." "Do you trust that day?" Ahsoka asked. "No," Bo-Katan said. "But I remember it." The comm clicked silent. Bo-Katan stood with her palm against the dome until her hand had warmed a print bigger than her own. In the days that followed, the treaty showed its collars and its teeth. The prisons opened, and men staggered blinking into sunlight who had not seen it for months. And some kissed the ground, and some spat on the walls, and some stood like broken statues with their faces turned toward nothing. Names were said as if the saying itself could knit bones. Mothers lifted children, and their ribs showed under their tunics. There were arguments about ration lines, and there were 3 fights near the water stations, and Bo-Katan sent her owls to hold places and pass out canteens because it was good to be seen doing it, and because it mattered. The forges returned to a rhythm that did not make men die on their feet. A boy laughed as he burned his fingers on a rivet and did not recall what it was to laugh in that place. Ursa Wren's people set tripwires along the hidden stairwells in the palace to teach Gar Saxon that some doors were watched by other eyes. Saxon learned the lesson slowly, as proud men did, by bleeding a little and blaming the door. Maul moved with a particular economy through the palace, at once absent and everywhere. He did not throw his voice into rooms where it was not needed, which made it more dangerous when it arrived. He listened to Rook Cast, and he listened to no one. He watched the city at night the way a reef predator watched a shelf of fish. Not hungry yet, but professional. His off-world soldiers left mostly. Bo-Katan could still smell them in the corners, the cold residue of their presence like the shadow left by a hand removed from a hot plate. She had one dragged from a closet in the transit sector, where he had decided the treaty did not apply to him, and she walked him to the airlock herself, and put him on a ship with a polite note pinned to his chest. The council met again, and again. They learned how to talk to one another without breaking furniture, and they learned who in the room had a voice that could close a subject when it had to be closed. They began to sketch the old clan law in a new shape, not to be written, not yet, but to be practiced until it made grooves in behavior that ink could then trace. Bo-Katan slept in small segments with her boots under her bed. She woke from dreams in which Satin's hair drifted in water, and Maul's eyes were candles that did not go out. She woke to messages from Ahsoka that said less than they meant, and meant more than they said. Another day purchased, another senator warmed and softened, Another general convinced to wait while he polished his plan until it shone and told him a beautiful lie. She woke to word that the 501st had been seen calibrating weapons in a hangar, where the breeze smelled of paint and appetite. She sent more food to the prison district. She sent armor patch kits to the farms. She went, once a day, to stand under the dome and make a circle of fog that faded and returned and faded again, the ritual of watching. It was on the 5th day of this particular life. Others were older, that she found Maul in the throne room alone. The guards dismissed or hiding themselves in shadows so thin they might as well not have been there. He held the dark saber, but he did not ignite it. He held it the way a monk might hold a relic, the weight of it both comfort and indictment. She stood at the edge of the room and did not disturb him, because she wanted to see how demons prayed. "This blade," he said finally, not turning, "was made by a Jedi who wore your armor. Imagine how much that enraged his order." "Taravisla," Bo-Katan said. "We do not own his ghost for you to borrow it." "I do not borrow," Maul said. "I appropriate." "Honest," Bo-Katan said. He turned then, and there was a nakedness in the movement, the light catching all the wrong places, the thinness at the temples, the tension in the hands that did not leave even when the weapon was at rest. "Who taught you to make treaties, Bo-Katan?" he asked. "It was not your sister." "She made hymns. My sister taught me how people break when you ask them to be better than they are before giving them away to be merely good," Bo-Katan said. "The rest I taught myself while men with red swords tried to turn my house into a dialectic." He considered that as if it were a spice he had not tasted. "You chose a path I did not calculate," he said. "When I stood over your sister's warm body, I did not imagine her blood would harden into this shape." "If you say her name like that again," Bo-Katan said, and her voice went quiet and immense in the room's center, "I will find out whether your head can be separated from your shoulders before your body discovers it is dead." He tilted his head. The smile he let through was soft and thin and wrong. "Very well," he said. "We keep our dead for ourselves. Do you keep yours?" Bo-Katan asked. "For a heartbeat. Half a..." Something opened in his face. Not grief. He had drowned that long ago and used its bones for a raft. Not love. The word did not fit around him. Something like absence had learned to wear meaning. Then it was gone, and he was all blade again. "The Republic will come," he said. "Your friend will not be able to keep them polite forever. When they do, your council will wish you had chosen the simpler path and tried to kill me in that first hour. When they come," Bo-Katan said, "I will put you where you belong, behind a door only I can open." "How romantic," he said. "And how practical." "Do you know how to be anything else?" she asked. "But a weapon in somebody's hand?" "I know how to be the hand," he said. "Good," Bo-Katan said. "Keep it steady. Mandalore is heavier than it looks." She turned and left him to his blade and his careful emptiness. On the balcony the air shivered with early morning, a taste like copper, like names. Below, the city moved. Above, the dome kept the sky like a secret. Between them all, Bo-Katan kept her balance, feet planted wide, hand ready on the knife the forge had given her, a treaty coiled in her throat, a war in a quiet rest position in her eyes. The Jedi were coming. The Republic was learning how to be a mask. The clans were remembering. And she had chosen, once, and then again, to stand in that place where none of those things could be given to anyone else. She went to meet Ahsoka at the edge of the square where the statues threw their spear shadows. It would be morning soon, and two women who had been many things would walk without their helmets, and try, very hard, to speak without their hands on their weapons. The city would listen. The dome would hold. The knives would stay sheathed. This once. For now. Oh, okay. They stood without helmets beneath the pale dome curve, hands empty except for what they carried in themselves. The statues in the square cast their long spear shadows, and the air held that brittle taste cities get in the cusp hour before the light. Ahsoka Tano kept her chin lifted as if the thin sky could add something to her spine, and Bo-Katan watched the way the dawn made her leku, a quiet blaze. Soldiers pretended not to look, which only meant they looked harder. The city listened. "You look thinner," Bo-Katan said finally, which was both unimportant and the only thing that wasn't a weapon yet. Ahsoka's mouth did a brief curve that refused to be called a smile. "I have been living in places that don't know how to feed themselves," she said. "You look different." "I chose a thing," Bo-Katan said. "Choosing changes the face." Ahsoka's eyes went past her to the palace, to the topmost window where rumors said a blade slept like a star in a scabbard. "It will not be enough to say you chose for Mandalore," she said softly. "There are people who will hear only that you chose with him. Then I will make a city that speaks louder than they do," Bo-Katan said. "Walk high." They walked. 2 armored women without their helmets moved through the square while the city pretended to stretch and cover its eyes. The night owls shadowed them in a pattern that looked almost like no pattern if you didn't know the language. In the alleys across the way, 2 of Maul's super commandos watched from their crimson stillness, the lacquer on their plates catching a small shard of the early light. The balance held. Bo-Katan took Ahsoka by the water channels first. The canals ran like polished obsidian cuts through Sundari, and the filtration pillars breathed their slow rhythm. Old men with their sleeves rolled knotted nets that were only nets by courtesy, a habit left when the desert had been a sea, and memory had been a currency anyone could spend. A child raced along the parapet, with a glow rod held like a sword, trailed by a mother who didn't want to be strict enough to shout. Ahsoka inclined her head to the old men and the child and the mother, a small charge of respect that made something beneath Bo-Katan's breastbone rearrange itself a fraction. "You remember this city from a different angle," Ahsoka said. "I remember it full of things that made my sister's heart sing," Bo-Katan said. "I am trying to learn its other songs." They went to the forges. Heat wrote its theology in the air. Sparks fell like colonies of brief stars setting in the metal river, and the presses stamped beats that the bones would learn if you let them. Bo-Katan did not speak there at first. She let the place talk for itself. Ahsoka stood with her hands tucked under her arms and watched a boy laugh when Ursa Wren rapped his knuckles with a rod for grabbing a length hot enough to brand a lesson into him that would last longer than he deserved. The boy laughed anyway, because Ursa was smiling despite herself. "Ursa," Bo-Katan said. Ursa dipped her head. "Lady Tano." She did not salute. She didn't with people who had stepped past titles and into persons. The child with her yesterday was not with her now. Even so, Ahsoka followed the empty space with her eyes and made the silent equations anyone makes when they see a mother and the shape absence leaves. "I heard there was singing at the prisons," Ahsoka said. "If you call that singing," Ursa said, "and the dryness was tender if you knew where to touch it. We opened the gates for those put there for asking for the law. Not for all. There are men who need to be watched longer before the city is safe with them inside it again. It is not a hymn yet. It is breath. Dan. Breath is a start," Ahsoka said. Ursa looked at Bo-Katan, and a thing like trust passed, which was not pretty to look at, but was steady. They stacked too many men in one block. They stripped them too thin. "We have to build the care the city forgot when it learned how to fear itself." "We are building it," Bo-Katan said. "Slow, and in places they do not want to look." Ursa tipped 2 fingers at Ahsoka. "Equal parts, salute and dismissal. If you've brought the Republic with you, they can bring clean blankets. If you've brought them with the wrong songs in their mouths, leave them in orbit." "Dem-shun." Ahsoka inclined her head, neither promising nor refusing. She knew better than to bind herself with a strong word, where a quieter one would leave space to live. They left the forge and walked closer to the dome's edge, where the city met the desert in a rim of tall windows. The desert lay like a long-held breath outside the glass, patient, particular, glitter faint in the sand. Ahsoka stood with her hands on the rail that separated those who lived inside from the open, that would skin you alive if you tried to love it without armor. "You don't trust him?" she said, quiet enough that the sentence had to be brought to completion. You trust the time you can buy with him. Bo-Katan gave a small sound that was not quite assent and not quite contempt for the obvious. I trust the thickness of the dome. I trust the people who show up when I ask. I trust the way the forges sound when they are not killing anyone to keep their rhythm. I trust you more than I trust the Republic at this hour. Memsal. Because I left the order, Ahsoka said, her mouth remembering its own wound with no mirror. Because you recognize a mask when you see it, Bo-Katan said. Because you know what it is to have a truth you can't make anyone else carry without breaking them. Ahsoka's head turned, not quite toward the palace, not quite toward the long line of the transit spire. Her eyes did the thing eyes do when they look the same direction as a memory. Anakin said once. She said slowly, that if you stood on a place like this, the edge of a hinged city, one that moved the galaxy with it, and you were quiet enough you could hear someone's choice 5 systems away. She laughed a little, and the sound was less pretty than it would have been 3 months ago, and more honest by the same measure. Obi-Wan said that was poetry, and therefore unreliable. Anakin called it physics, and said the equations for it were only being written very slowly. Tell Skywalker to write faster, Bo-Katan said. We are already paying interest. Ahsoka's leku dipped, which was as close to a real smile as the morning dared. Then her head turned more cleanly toward the palace. Does he know why you chose this? She asked, meaning the demon with the hunger and the blade. Meaning the treaty braided from hard looks and harder promises. He thinks he knows, Bo-Katan said. He thinks I chose because I am hungry to sit where he sits. Most men imagine their own appetite when they try to guess a woman's. And what do you imagine when you try to guess his? Ahsoka asked. I do not guess, Bo-Katan said. I count. He plans. He does not sleep. He hears something large turning and wants to put his hand on the axle to feel it break his bones. It is not courage. It is spite's elegant cousin. Pride, Ahsoka said. Yes, Bo-Katan said. With talent. They went from the windowed rim to the prison district. You could tell where it started by the way sound changed. Footsteps held themselves differently where walls remembered what it was to be hit, and breaths did peculiar shallow things where mouths had learned to make their own air last. The gate stood open now. A makeshift table had become a place where names were recited. The old ritual had no liturgy but the name, and that was enough for this morning. Women with their hair braided like rope came to find men whose eyes were not the right color yet, because you cannot unlearn the dark all at once. Ahsoka passed between them with her hands empty in a way the body recognizes and relaxes toward. Bo-Katan watched the way a man swayed when Ahsoka put her palm against his shoulder. Not a gesture you survive in many rooms, and therefore precious, and how he straightened like a post, set into fresh concrete. They came to the table. An elder with a face held together by long practice, rather than by hope, looked up as if he had been expecting them and had been practicing his expression. Bo-Katan inclined her head to him with the equal gravity of a duelist acknowledging a blade pointed at her. Ahsoka took a breath that was almost a bow, and did not finish it, because both of them knew what names were in this part of the city, and who had not walked out with the others. Your sons, Bo-Katan said. The language in Mandoa for what she meant was precise and hurt correctly. Sons who had not lived long enough to become men in the way a mother measures a man. Sons who had been taken before they had made enough mistakes to become their mistakes instead of their mother's children. We could not retrieve them all. Some were mislaid on paper because a paper is easier to mislay than a person. Some were moved. We have names for the ones who were moved. We do not yet have doors that open for those names. We are looking. The elder's eyes were a dry well. You made a treaty with the one who killed our Duchess, he said. That was a sentence that can split a city, or save it depending on which word you use to turn it. I made a treaty with the one who would have destroyed this city slower by leaning on our throats, Bo-Katan said. I made a treaty so that I could come here and say that sentence to you with the gates open. I do not expect forgiveness. I expect you to hold me to exactly the thing I have promised. Bo-Katan, Ahsoka said softly, a word that was a hand on a blade. It is all right, Bo-Katan said. I prefer it this way. The elder looked at Ashoka now, measuring. Not as a Jedi, not as a thing from stories children tell when they want to sleep with eyes open, but as a person who had a voice and could be held to it. And you? He asked. Who do you make treaties with? People who can be held to them, Ahsoka said. Not saints. Saints make terrible allies. They only keep their promises to themselves. The elder's mouth did the ancient shape that might one day be a blessing if you didn't ruin it by naming it. If you bring war to this city, he said, let it be a clean one with names on it. Bo-Katan put her palm briefly to the table. If war comes, she said, you will hear why from my mouth. They moved away. Ahsoka kept silence until they had crossed a street where a man was showing a child the knot he had learned under the dome's previous music. Tell me what you want me to say to them, Ahsoka said. Up there. The generals. The senators who hear the word Mandalore as if it were a spice that belongs on their plates. The man who calls himself chancellor and thinks no one sees his hand reaching around the back of the Senate to close its throat. Tell me the sentence that will buy you the most time and cost the least lives. I will speak it. I will own it. Then? Bo-Katan laughed once, wholly without joy. Do you know what it is to hear someone say a thing like that to you, when there is still dust in your chest, from where your city's bones rearranged last week? It is like water. It is like the sound of an engine starting in the right pitch. Then say it, Ahsoka said. Say this, Bo-Katan said. Mandalore has ejected the off-world syndicates. The forges belong to Mandalorians. The prisons are open to those who were inside for speaking the law. There is a council that includes the clans and no longer includes the syndicates. There is a treaty. It holds as long as it holds. We are armed and wish to be left alone long enough to grow fat again. They will not like fat, Ahsoka said. They prefer their neutrals to be thin. Then tell them we wish to be patient, Bo-Katan said. And tell them the word siege tastes like a poison we know how to spit. They reached the foot of the transit spire. Bo-Katan stopped and turned to Ahsoka. The tilt of her head was something like an embrace if you knew how much armor there was between them and what it took to lift it, even that fraction. When they come, she said, come to me first, not to him. If you go to him, he will make the room feel like a window you could fall out of. I have fallen out of worse, Ahsoka said. I will come to you anyway. And bring me a clean blanket, Bo-Katan said. Ursa will forgive your republic if you bring blankets. They parted there under the spire's shadow, which fell long like an old promise. Ahsoka took the lift toward an unmarked ship and a coded comm channel that would take her through a Senate office that used to smell of fresh paper and had begun to smell of burning lacquer. Bo-Katan turned toward the palace with her helmet under her arm and the treaty in her jaw like a coin she meant to buy bread with over and over. Until someone noticed the old emperor's head on it. She felt him in the hall before she saw him. Predators alter the air. The feeling of Maul in a room was like a small change in the pressure, as if physics had been convinced to do a trick children aren't supposed to know exists. He stood at the end of a colonnade where the light broke and broke again on the edges of him. Rook cast ghosted out of an aperture and took up a place that said she could do violence without moving more than a finger. You have shown her the city, Maul said. What did it look like from her eyes? Alive, Bo-Katan said. That is an inconvenience to many who prefer their maps neatly labeled. Maul's mouth made the shape it made when he recognized an argument he had no interest in making against. She will ask your republic to wait, he said. They will not wait long. I do not expect them to, Bo-Katan said. I expect them to taste the word patience until they hate it. I expect them to try to give it to their children and watch it be spit back into their hands. You are good at this, Maul said. I admit that I wanted you to be only the thing my men said you were, the sister of a woman who thought the world was a room that could be decorated, the fighter who could only kick down a door. You are more elastic than that. Elastic is a word for cowards who call compromise a courage, Bo-Katan said. I am not elastic. I am a scaffolding. He took in her face, not lustful, not even hungry in that way. Hungry toward power. Yes, toward the satisfaction of seeing an argument become a building. He liked the shape of work when it made itself under his hand. He did not like the places where work meant feeding people who were not soldiers. He did not like, Bo-Katan could tell by the way his shoulders retained tension at the phrase, the idea that the body politic needs sleep. The Republic is moving ships toward your sky, he said. My people say they practice boarding drills in the hangars and make bets about what color the lights in Sundari are at night. They mock your dome. They call it a snow globe. They do not understand that it is a skull. You do not open such a thing casually. What is inside will smell too strongly. You would know, Bo-Katan said. Oh yes, Maul said. The sound was not laughter. There is a scent to a mind when it has been opened by someone with the wrong kind of love. She stopped, because that word in that mouth could make the room crack. Tell me what you are planning, she said instead. Blunt because you have to be blunt when the other person enjoys negations, the way a lictor enjoys the slow lifting of a blade. I am planning for a tide, Maul said. I feel it coming. Not from your Republic's petty admirals and their exercises. From somewhere older. From Coruscant. A thing with a name, wisely kept shut within other names. You think you signed a treaty to keep my hand off your forges. You have placed your fingers on a larger instrument. You do not know the song yet. You may not like it. I will play the song that keeps this city in one piece, Bo-Katan said. That is a very small song, Maul said, almost tender. I should know. I have hummed it while wrapped in iron. She closed the distance between them a fraction. You will not use my city as bait to draw the thing you want, she said. You will not put your hooks in Ahsoka to catch Skywalker and whatever sits in his shadow. His eyes flared, then cooled, the embers suppressed but alive. You speak names as if you are immune to them, he said. He is a hinge. Ahsoka is a handle. I only observe the mechanics. She is a person, Bo-Katan said. In my house, on my soil, under my sky. Do not imagine you can move her like a piece on a board without my hand on your wrist. Menshao. Rook Cast's visor tilted a degree, which on another face would be amusement. On hers might be the muscle memory of surprise that no longer wore a human shape. Maul's smile was the old one again. Thin as the difference between a tendon and the knife that cuts it. Very well, he said. We will not pull the handle in your house. We will wait until the hinge turns on its own. He did not promise not to cut to the bone when the hinge turned. He did not have to. Bo-Katan placed the shape of that promise in her own mind, and wrapped it in Beskar, and kept it with the other things she would pay out of his power later. The blockade came like a ring thrown carelessly into the sky, and then tightened. The first ships wore Republic liveries, the paint still fresh in places where mechanics with paint under their nails had grinned for the first time in days, because a ship under your hands is a thing that answers. They came in an arc that said practice and politics, not murder, and took up places at measured intervals. Bo-Katan went to the palace comm room and stood with her palms braced on the edge of the table, while a hollow sprang and resolved. An admiral's face, trim and tired. Deep lines where discipline and long nights lay amicably together. The kind of man who knew how to be fair until a voice told him to stop. Admiral, Bo-Katan said. Lady Kryze, he said, and his eyes flickered to her armor, in the way men do when they are checking, if the person speaking to them understands being shot at. He must have heard stories once about blue night owls, darting through an alley like midnights with wings. I am placed here to ensure the safety of the Republic, and to encourage the restoration of your world's legitimate government. The Republic did not legitimate my sister, Bo-Katan said. The Republic called her inconvenient when she would not sing the right song in their chamber. The Republic did not legitimate Pre Vizsla. The Republic did not legitimate Almec. Mandalore legitimates Mandalore. The Admiral did not sigh because he had been trained not to. Nevertheless, he said, and the word told his whole education in Senate corridors. "We must insist that the criminal currently possessing your throne." Bo-Katan lifted one palm and let the words turn aside on it. "I know what you must insist," she said. "I understand this, Fog." "Speak the other sentence, the private one, the one you do not show your recorder." The Admiral hesitated, then returned the courtesy. He muted the recorder, not a performative gesture. She heard the tiny tick of the switch that told her he had just broken a rule. "We are told," he said, and now the voice was a tired man's voice in a kitchen, not a uniform's voice in a chamber, "that your city has ejected the Syndicate soldiers. We have signals from your docks that show cargo moving out, not in. We have intel that you are feeding your forges again with your own hands. We have a senator and a general's report that argues for patience." "Ahsoka," Bo-Katan said. The Admiral allowed the barest of nods. "We can hold for days," he said. "Not weeks. There are other things at play." "I know," Bo-Katan said. "I do not ask for weeks. I ask for days. Let them be quiet. Let the people in this city learn to trust the guard on their street. If you land now, even with your best faces on, you ruin work I cannot repeat without spending the lives of the men who will feed your children one day. Give me 3 rotations. Then, if you must, bring your parade." "Menetwan." He looked at her. "You can tell, if you've lived with soldiers long enough, when a soldier recognizes another one under an unfamiliar uniform." He did the math behind his eyes. He tasted the word "sieg" with the same distaste she did. He had reports in his hand about clones ready to stretch their legs planet-side, and a senator's call that had used the word optics in a way that meant something ugly in a city small enough the word should never have fit. 3 rotations, he said. "No gunships in your sky unless fired upon. I want holo every 6 hours. If your city bleeds a citizen in public, at the hands of an off-worlder in armor with horns painted on his head, I will not be able to keep my leash from being yanked." Bo-Katan's face didn't alter. "If a man with horns painted on his head bleeds one of mine in public, I will bring you his helmet full of his teeth myself," she said. "I do not need your leash. I have my own." He cut the line before he liked her too much. 3 rotations meant space, and space meant Saxon tried to fill it. Gar Saxon believed in a world that rewarded the first man to move with a knife. He coordinated the color of his cloak with the time of day, and liked to stand at slight angles to doors, so that his profile would live well in a story later. He had men who owed him, and he had debts to men who were making lists they would use when he decided to forget. He chose a market with a good line of sight to the palace steps, and a stall whose owner had a soft place for the wrens. He put a package where a woman would be asked to carry it for a moment, because Gar Saxon understood how the story gets written after, and who gets blamed, and what the song sounds like when it has a woman's name in it. The night owls worked a circuit like blood through an organ that cannot afford to fail. Casca, who had a tattoo she covered carefully because it had been a mistake, and she wanted to remember not to make it twice, saw the way the woman's hand hovered over the package, as if the package were a prayer that might count if you touched it. Casca saw the man who had put it there not look at it. She saw Rook cast on the far side of the street, look at the same space, and do the small shift that meant her body was already locating cover. "Bo," Casca said on the low band. Bo-Katan answered in a syllable that could be mistaken for a breath. She was 2 streets over, arguing with a line of men about why a water ration was a thing for fair division, and not a test of masculinity conducted with elbows. "Under the orange tarp with the copper kettles," Casca said. "Left of the magistrate's steps. Rook sees it." "Not a drill," Bo-Katan said. Quietly. Rook moved first, not disrespectfully, not as a thief of glory, but with the professional pride of someone who knows when she is the one who can put her hand into a snake's mouth and come out with a fang. She approached with her weapon down and her helmet tilted in the posture of a buyer. She asked the stallholder in a kindly monotone about the weight of the kettles. The woman answered in the ruptured courtesy of someone who has learned to be polite to men with guns, but has not yet been taught to extend that politeness to the women who serve them. Rook reached for the handle of the package the way she would reach to test a hinge. The woman's hand fluttered the way hands do when they are about to get people killed out of politeness. "Let me," Rook muttered, and her gauntlet found the seam where two wires kissed. The package did not have the honest brutality of a military charge. It had the deceitful charm of a thing that looked like a gift and had been made by someone who was proud of being clever at the wrong time. She found the heartbeat, the pulse, under the wrap. She spoke to Bo-Katan without moving her mouth. "Lux fuses. He's nostalgic," Rook said. "Cut the third and the first," Bo-Katan said automatically. "Because some tricks repeat and some men cannot help leaving their signature in other people's bodies. Saxon will want to watch." The first wire spoke like a struck insect when Rook severed it. The second exhaled. She lifted the package and passed it to Casca, who reversed direction mid-stride and carried it like a sleeping infant into the shadow of a pillar where an old fountain had been turned off, when the city taught itself to not love extravagance. Bo-Katan arrived then, crossing the open with the steady calm that makes other people remember how to behave. She took the package into her own hands long enough to feel the weight of the man behind it, then laid it down on the stone like a name being spoken at the right time by the right mouth. "You will not break my city to prove what a man you are," she said aloud, because she wanted the sentence to exist in sung air even if Saxon had chosen his window well. "You will not make a woman carry your cowardice for you, because you were afraid you would blow your own hand off." The market performed its part with more restraint than most would have. There were cries that got their throats closed before they could become screams, and there were children who were picked up without the kind of dramatics that tell a child something special is happening. And there were men who did not try to step forward pretending they could help. Rook handed Casca a strip of wire like a trophy, and Casca put it in a pocket the way you keep a receipt to show a man later when he tries to pretend he never bought the thing you have now put on the table. Gar Saxon did not come to see Bo-Katan privately after that. He had the sense. He had an animal's sense for which rooms contained traps he could not fragrance his way out of. He put his head down and drilled his men harder instead, and that was fine, because you can learn much by watching how a man shouts his way out of the soft music of humiliation. Ahsoka returned with a tiredness beyond the body, the kind that no bed can teach you out of. She came not by the transit spire and not under the eyes of the market. She came by a service lift whose door had been careful with its squeaks, because the man who cared for it was quick with oil and believed in the sacraments of maintenance. Bo-Katan met her in a corridor that smelled like cleanser and a memory she did not have time to locate. They did not embrace. They did the smaller thing, which is to stand without reaching for weapons. "I bought you 3 rotations," Ahsoka said. "The Admiral thinks you are the best kind of problem, which is the kind that can be solved with politics. The Chancellor thinks he has other things to attend to, and is content to pretend Mandalore is a thing he can put between pages and close the book on for 48 hours. There is a general who loves you because you brought him spiced tea once, when his throat was raw after he shouted your name across a landing pad. There is another general who despises you and admires you at the same time because you remind him of a woman he once failed to keep from killing herself by calling it a sacrifice. All these things make a net. I cannot tell you how long it will hold." "Then, you have done enough," Bo-Katan said, and meant it so fully it startled her ribs. Ahsoka's hand lifted half an inch and fell. "He will try to use me," she said, not melodramatic, simply a fact. "He wants Anakin here. He thinks Anakin is a door he can open, walk through, and find the center of whatever has been hunting him since he learned there were names in the dark. He is not wrong that Anakin is at the center of something. He is only wrong that he knows which way the center is spinning." "Then I told him he would not use you in my house," Bo-Katan said. "He agreed because it was the sentence that cost him least in the moment he heard it. He will find another sentence to say to himself later when the air shifts." Ahsoka made a small sound that might have been amusement, and might have been the throat making itself remember air. "I told Anakin I would not let him come," she said. He laughed. "He thinks the galaxy is a thing that will bring him whatever he loves if he simply stands in the right place long enough with his hands out. He is not entirely wrong. He is also a child sometimes." "Then Children get burned when they put their hands where they should not, Bo-Katan said. So do men. Sometimes the place burns first, Ahsoka said. They went up to the balcony that looked across the square. The statues threw their spears farther than they had in mornings past. Time stretches shadow and contracts it. A law the forges obeyed, the market obeyed, the palace obeyed at last. The first of the blockade ships altered their position slightly for the afternoon watch in a movement that told of men rubbing their eyes and saying, at last, that they would like to remember what gravity feels like. Ahsoka's calm chirped in a way Bo-Katan recognized, the sound of duty clear enough to separate its note from all the other notes people carry. Ahsoka did not answer it. She let it chirp again, then silenced it. The silence landed between them like a piece that doesn't fit until you turn it and realize you've been holding it upside down the whole time. What are you not telling me? Bo-Katan said. That there's a smell to the Force now that wasn't there when I was a foundling, Ahsoka said. That it is like standing downwind of a factory that makes something with a sweetness that is also a poison. That there is a word in the air, and I do not know which mouth will say it first. My people do not put words in the air unless they mean to own them, Bo-Katan said. You have always been practical, Ahsoka said, and the gratitude in the sentence lifted something with gentleness. Bo-Katan did not often suffer. That night, the city's music changed. Not the forges, not the water channels, not the step sounds in the prison quarter. The tone that came in the hour when the dome's lights dim and the streets are for lovers and thieves and children, who aren't supposed to be out, and old women who cannot sleep, because their knees remember the weather of a planet that doesn't have weather. The music that changed was the palaces. Doors opened and closed with an extra edge. Voices murmured in a frequency too tight to be carelessness. Rook Cast moved more quickly when she thought no one was watching, because there are people who do not know how to be slow unless they are dying, and she was not dying. Maul walked with less silence, which made his silence more dangerous when it returned. Bo-Katan found him alone in the throne room again, because there are places predators return to when they need a geometry that reminds them they are the shape that matters in a room. He held the darksaber and was not igniting it. He was looking at the chair's shadow on the steps. He was listening to the way the dome's generated wind touched the banners. If he had been a man who believed in gods, Bo-Katan thought, he would have been making them with tools and then breaking them to see what sang when it snapped. You are making my city a bell, she said. I am hearing the clapper, he said. It is a simple instrument. Only a fool would think he could not understand it by looking. But there is a frequency the ear misses unless it has been forced to hear worse and asked to hear it again. She came to the foot of the dais and did not bow. You feel something, she said, not asking because men like him hear questions as opportunities to lie. Yes, he said. You will not like what it makes me want. What do you want? She asked. Say it. Do not hold the knife under the table. Put it down where we can both admire the workmanship. I want Skywalker, he said. The blade in the word had a shape that had not been sharpened in this room before. I want to peel the man from the legend and the legend from the mask, and ask the thing inside which side it belongs to. I want to put my hands on the axle. I want to hear the screech of the galaxy when I force it to turn the other way. Dender. And you think you hear him? Bo-Katan said. I hear the hand that will make him, Maul said. I hear the command taught to soldiers in their bones. I hear a sentence murder will wear as a uniform. I hear a word a child will try to forget and a planet will take into itself, like a seed it cannot help germinating. I hear the door opening at Coruscant. I hear a laugh. I am tired of hearing that laugh. I am tired of hearing that laugh. Bo-Katan took a breath that had to be measured, because unmeasured breaths break glass. You will not bring him here, she said. If the door opens there, it will open somewhere else. You will not make my city a stage for your duel with the thing that made your first life. You will not. He stared at her, as if she had just said a sentence he had been waiting for someone to say since he had learned his own name. He smiled the thin smile again, not hungry, not kind, just the recognition of a particular instrument played correctly. Bo-Katan, he said, you are very good at telling the truth in rooms where people would prefer poetry. You are very bad at listening to anyone else, she said. Hold your soldiers. Keep the roads quiet. If you need to fight the ghosts that taught you how to be, do it somewhere my children will not remember with their teeth. He considered, then inclined his head the bare number of degrees that indicate calculation, as well as ascent. I will remain, he said. For now. For now, she said, and did not fail to notice the echo come back a different shape in his mouth. The second rotation brought a rain of small things that accumulate into a weather. A merchant found a line of tulip bulbs he'd been hoarding for a decade, and handed them out to children like a man tithing joy. Ursa Wren's husband, who had the kind of face that made you think he would stand between a storm and anything he loved without pretending he could stop it, just to get the storm to go around, returned from the outlands with news about ore shipments that did not include the word stolen. The power grid hiccuped at the edge of the desert dome, and two boys who should not have been there, and were there anyway, fixed it with their hands, and a length of wire and a joke. They were sensible enough not to tell within hearing of guards. Ahsoka moved through the city with the quiet tread of someone who remembers what it is to be welcome, and does not abuse the welcome by making it into a performance. She taught 3 children a trick for tying a loop knot that could save a life when you were hanging upside down over a pit, and wished you had a third arm. Bo-Katan watched all of this and allowed herself an hour where she did not expect to be needed at every corner. Saxon bled on a step. It was not dramatic blood. It was not the kind that leaves a trail the statue can point at. It was the kind you do not show to the men you command, because it makes them remember that you are made of the same things they are. Skin, wetness, the ability to bruise from within. He did not tell the story of the cut correctly. He made it a good story with good villains and his own face in the part of the man who sees everything coming. Bo-Katan stood 2 paces away while he told it, and watched the way Rook Kast's visor tilted. Rook did not correct him. She did not need to. The correction sat in the angle of her helmet, like a knife on a table that hasn't been used yet. When dusk came, Ahsoka and Bo-Katan climbed to the walkway that ran toward the dome's apex. Children had cut their names into the guardrail 3 regimes ago, and the letters had softened the way names do in wood, when the wood remembers what it was to be a tree. The city breathed beneath them. The ships above adjusted once more for their half-sleep in orbit. I spoke to Obi-Wan, Ahsoka said almost conversationally, as if saying she had spoken to a man in the market who sold clean wiring. He told me Anakin is being pulled toward the center of a room where a particular kind of conversation happens once in 1,000 years, when a door has finally learned to open. He told me he is leaving for the Outer Rim to chase a general who keeps not dying. Kenobi, Bo-Katan said, letting the word do the thing names sometimes do. Draw the edges of a person into the room around you. He has the kind of goodness that hurts too many to keep working. He has the kind of goodness that keeps not dying, which is its own problem, Ahsoka said. He believes in an old story and keeps finding new chapters where the hero is tired and still has to light the fire. Tell him, Bo-Katan said, and then stopped because there are people who do not need to be told anything, and because the last time she had made a sentence meant for a man like that, she had been 20 and didn't yet know you cannot fix a legend by loving it better. Ahsoka watched the line where the city met its own glass. He asked me what I thought you were doing, she said. I told him you were learning to carry a weight that does not fit into a holster. He said you reminded him of someone once. I told him to watch his metaphors. You have become unkind, Bo-Katan said, and there was no condemnation in it, only the recognition of a blade honed by what it cut. I have become less patient with beautiful lies, Ahsoka said. There is a difference. They stood in silence, 2 women at the top of a bowl that kept the weather out and made its own. The stars were the same stars. The city was a different city. The word that Ahsoka had smelled earlier moved closer to the shape of a mouth. When the 3 rotations ended, the Admiral kept his half of the promise. He opened a channel. He did the formal words for the recorder, and then shut the recorder off and said, I cannot stop them from sending a gunship to observe. They will put men with polite faces in it, and insist it is a courtesy patrol. It is not, but we will call it that until one of us is tired of lying. Bo-Katan's expression did not alter. Send your men with your polite faces? she said. They will find a city prepared to be observed. They will not like how much they cannot see. He sent a single lat gunship with a handful of clones who made the air around them thrum with discipline. They came down like a beetle that had learned manners and sat down in the square with the statues in the posture of men, arriving at a dinner they didn't want to attend, but were too well brought up to refuse. The clones disembarked in perfect rhythm. The sergeant leading them lifted his helmet to speak to Bo-Katan, and had a face whose cheekbones gave his discipline a place to rest. "Sergeant," Bo-Katan said. "Your names?" "MCT 5597. The sergeant said, then added, "Kicker." He did not look ashamed to add the second name. He did not look proud. He simply handed it to the air like a man putting his card on a table. "This is Lift. This is Jaro. This. We will learn them," Bo-Katan said. "We will use them if we need to shout." Kicker's mouth did a small thing that on another man would have been humor. He kept his weapon low. His men kept theirs lower. He looked past Bo-Katan and saw Ahsoka walking out of the shadow of a pillar, and his head titled, the way men's heads tilt. When the body recognizes a command, it has enjoyed following in another life. "Commander," he said, and then corrected himself with an effort that looked like statistics holding back a tide. "Ma'am?" Ahsoka nodded once, not unkind, not naming. "Sergeant," she said. "Keep your patrol out of the prison quarter. It is not an order. It is a practical kindness." "Ben?" "Yes, ma'am," he said promptly, which is sometimes the same thing as obedience, and sometimes only a man being courteous to a woman he has not yet decided how to measure. "We'll do a sweep around the transit spire and the water channels and let your people watch us watch them. We won't shoot unless someone makes us." "No one will make you," Bo-Katan said. "That's good," Kicker said. And for a second, there was a man's face and not a mask. They marched the pattern and found nothing they could use to write a report that would satisfy the hunger above them. They saw a boy burn his knuckles and laugh. They saw a woman pass a loaf to another woman without writing it down. They saw a market without a bomb because a woman with a visor like a wound had put her hand in a snake's mouth and come out with 2 teeth for her trouble. They saw Maul standing on a balcony with his hands behind him, and they did not know what to make of the way he did not move to be seen better. Night came. Ahsoka slept in a bed that had not been used since a duchess asked for extra pillows because her sister would not stop working and would need a place to fall asleep when she finally ran out of verbs. Bo-Katan stood watch at a window with a knife the forge had given her and tried to be a roof. The clones sat under their gunship's shadow and cleaned their weapons the way men pray when their god is a chamber that maintains pressure correctly. Maul walked the palace with his eyes half closed, listening to the thread he wanted to pull and finding it thinner tonight. Rook Cast dreamed about a ladder and woke with her hand closed on nothing. Gar Saxon lay awake, counting where his men were and where honor wasn't. The morning that followed did not so much arrive as reveal that it had been there all along and only now felt like being seen. Ahsoka went up to the walkway. Bo-Katan was already there, helmet off, hair dragged back with the impatience of a woman who has decided that beauty is for evenings where there is wine and no one asks her to write laws with her mouth. A siren sounded once far in the upper atmosphere. Not an alarm. Not yet. An adjustment. Ships moving to a new burn. Ahsoka's comm chirped. She let it. Bo-Katan did not ask who called. She knew the sound of Skywalker's insistence even when it did not get to the air. The call died. Another came. She silenced that too. She put the device on the rail and watched it, like a small animal, deciding if it would bite. "He will go to Coruscant," Ahsoka said. "He will walk into a room and choose a word that will make a lever. Obi-Wan will be across the galaxy, asking a man who should have died 1,000 honorable deaths to do him the favor of doing one more. The clones will have a thought put in their heads that will not feel like a thought because it fits so well around their bones." "Ben?" Bo-Katan did not spit, because the dome is sensitive about fluids. "If that word comes here," she said, "what will you do?" "I will do what I can," Ahsoka said. "And I will fail in ways that make something else possible." "You always did like to sound like him when you were trying not to," Bo-Katan said, and the bleakness of the attempt at humor did them both a kindness by not pretending to be lighter than it was. Bo-Katan went down. She spoke to Ursa Wren. She spoke to the elder with the dry well eyes and told him, as promised, what might be coming through the air. She spoke to Rookcast, and the words in that conversation were less than the glances, and more than the many blades they each had left sheathed. And when they had finished, Rook stood a fraction closer to Bo-Katan than she had the day before. She spoke to Gar Saxon, and watched him do the thing a man does when he realizes the story he is going to tell himself later will make him the protagonist even if he dies today, which is to adjust his collar and ask for a different hill to stand on. She found Maul last. He stood in a room that wasn't made for standing. Too long, too low. A place for sitting and pretending the city is a map under your hand. He did not pretend. He watched the holographic lines of the blockade ships, and the tiny dots, representing clones moving in a pattern, whose elegance had been taught to them on Camino, by men who have never had dust under their nails. He watched the dots as if he were calculating how many would fit under his boot heel if he placed it correctly. "Your republic is about to learn a word," he said. "And my city is about to be taught a lesson by men who think their lesson is the only way to right." Bo-Katan said. "Hold." He looked at her, and there was the thing again. Reluctant respect as a choice made not because his heart wanted it, but because his talent required accuracy. "I will not be the one who makes your children remember today with their teeth," he said. "But when the door opens, I will use it." "You are not the only one who can," Bo-Katan said. "I have men who have been waiting 4 years to take a door off its hinges with their bare hands and throw it into the desert." He inclined his head as if to acknowledge that her poetry in armor was as good as his sometimes. "Let us see who laughs first." The word came in the afternoon when the dome light has a particular angle that makes it hard to tell if the man facing you is beautiful or a liar. There are words that are looks in the air, and words that are hands. This was a hand laid on a galaxy's throat from one room, and everywhere else the room answered with muscle memory. The clone's comms flickered like fish. Kicker looked up with his helmet in his lap, as if wondering for an instant if the thing under his hand was alive, and if it would bite him if he put it on. Bo-Katan was in the square, her knives put away and her words sharpened, and she saw the moment the air changed. It is the smallest thing. A muscle under the eye. A breath that has to remember itself. Ahsoka was halfway up the walkway and stopped with one hand on the rail, and closed her eyes hard, as if inside them there were a storm she could push back with lids. Maul lifted his head. Rookcast put her finger on a trigger, and then took it off and set it alongside the guard, because she could hear the difference between a command and a reflex, even when that difference would get her dead. Kicker's hand tightened around his helmet. He put it on. He stood. For a heartbeat, there was a man inside the shell who knew his own name, and had once let a Qui-Gon story about the Force be read to him, because General Kenobi liked to pretend the clones needed bedtime tales when they were on long ships and the engines were too loud to sleep. Then there was the order, and there were the bones, and there was the line of men lifting their weapons with the great elegance of men doing the thing their bodies were made to do. Bo. Ahsoka's voice came over a channel Bo-Katan had not given her and had not needed to. "They've. I see them," Bo-Katan said. The first shots did not come. That was the mercy and the cruelty. The clones did not open fire on a crowd. They took 3 steps and swung their pattern. Kicker's rifle came up, low, precise, not yet spewing. He turned to Ahsoka because the order in his ear had said something about Jedi, and his bones knew that word before his mind translated it. Ahsoka moved like a woman who had practiced every day of a war to defend and not to kill. She dropped in front of 2 civilians whose names she would never learn, and took a bolt on a forearm where a blade was not and would not be, and she turned it aside with nothing but the exactness of an angle and the Force's insistence on being used where it is wanted. "Stand down," Bo-Katan shouted, her voice in the kind of register that spends years being honed on parade grounds and in deserts and in rooms where only men had been taught how to speak. "Sergeant Kicker." She used the human name not because she believed in it as magic, but because she believed in it as a rope thrown to a man in water with a weight around his neck. Kicker's head jerked. It was a movement that would have been amusement yesterday. Today, it was the motion of a mind breaking for a breath and making a decision before it could be forced back together. He did not lower his rifle. He did not raise it another degree. He froze like a machine interrupted mid-cycle and, for the space of 3 heartbeats, remembered something that did not fit inside the order. Lift took another step. Jero's finger tightened, slackened. The gunship behind them powered its engines, which was either a threat or the pilot not wanting to be a stationary target in a city that was about to remember what it was like to chew. Maul stepped onto the balcony. He did not ignite the blade. He did not speak. He stood like a question written in a language anyone would prefer to pretend they didn't read. Bo-Katan saw him and made the decision her city needed. She took 2 steps and put herself in front of Ahsoka and the civilians with her hands wide and empty. She did not call for her helmet, though Casca's hand lifted without being asked and held it out, as if the shape of that gesture could stitch a skin over a moment that was about to be flayed. "Sergeant," Bo-Katan said again, and now her voice carried everything: the night she had chosen to not put a round through Maul's skull, and the morning she had told an elder the truth without asking for absolution, and the hour she had written a treaty in a room where the air had been crazy with the smell of iron and the memory of her sister's hair. "This is Bo-Katan Kryze. This is not your enemy. Not yet. Not today. Not like this." Besimdao. Kicker's rifle lowered a degree. The comm in his ear hissed with a voice as soft as a knife being drawn across leather. It said a name. Not his. Not hers. A category. Ahsoka felt the word in her bones and nearly fell. She gritted her teeth as if you can hold the Force in with molars. She did not draw a blade she no longer wore. She raised her hand and did the old move a master had taught her before he died the first time. A palm up, a breath. The Force slowed in front of a barrel like honey poured over a mouth. "Kicker," she said. "Look at me." He did. There was a man there, and a mask there, and the order sitting across both like a bridge that had been placed in a hurry and refused to fit the contours of the ground. His face did not change. His body did. Some men's bodies tell you when they are about to shoot. His told her he was trying not to. "Is there a medical bay near?" Bo-Katan said on the small channel commander's share, when they don't have time to ask if the other is a commander. One that can handle a man in armor without making him feel like a machine. "Under the east steps," Ahsoka said. 2 floors down. A room that used to be for quiet, back when. "Good," Bo-Katan said. Then aloud, "Sergeant, come with me." The order in his ear turned toxin sweet. The gunship's engines kicked. The clones around him tightened their pattern. Kicker lifted his chin. Ahsoka felt the Force move around him and did not try to pull it. She gave it shape, like a riverbank given to water that wants to rage. He took 1 step. Then another. He did not lower his weapon. He did not swing it toward her. He let the barrel point at the ground because the ground is the one thing that will forgive you pointing at it. Bo-Katan walked in front of him, not behind, because behind is for people who are not willing to be shot. She took him under the east steps with the night owls closing like the edges of a thing being cut out of paper. Ahsoka and Casca came fast. The room was cool. It had been a place for quiet once. Now it had lights too bright for that. The medic there saw a clone, and saw a woman, and saw another woman, and made the only sensible decision, which was to become very smaller than the moment required and grab a scanner. Ahsoka put her palm against Kicker's brow plate. It was not a move she had invented. It was not a move a Jedi is supposed to know if she intends to keep her sainthood. It was a move taught to her in the underbelly of a cruiser by a man who had seen the schematics for the thing in a clone's head and had not been willing to call it a kindness even once. She closed her eyes and went in as if the man were a house that had been locked by a child with a tantrum. Bo-Katan did not look away. She put her back to the door and her eyes on the hallway and counted heartbeats, because that is the metronome that will not lie. Kicker made a sound. A small one. Men are loud on battlefields and very quiet when something in their mind changes shape without their permission. Ahsoka's breath hitched with the effort of holding a river that had been dammed and wanted to flood every room at once. The Metis device made a tone that meant a circuit had been located, and then another tone that meant it had been interrupted, and then a tone that meant someone had done something the device had not been taught to admire, because no one had expected to be this lucky, this quickly. "It's done," Ahsoka said, and her voice was a scratchy thing, a woman's voice, the hour after a scream that had been held in her ribs. Kicker exhaled. He took his helmet off. He looked at Ahsoka, as if expecting to find a brand on her forehead that would tell him what to do. Finding none, he looked at Bo-Katan. She gave him a name to stand on. "Kicker," she said. "Your orders are wrong. Someone has placed the word enemy over the wrong faces." "Yes, ma'am," he said. It came out reflex. Faith. Relief. A child's word pushed through a soldier's throat. "What are my orders?" "Keep your men from killing the wrong people," Bo-Katan said. "Very quietly. Then come back here with one of them at a time. You want—" He glanced at Ashoka's hand. She withdrew it. He looked like a man who has agreed to let someone take his blood and is deciding whether he will watch the needle go in. "Yes," Bo-Katan said. "I want you to bring me your brothers to keep the thing in their heads from being used to make them murderers." He closed his eyes once. He opened them. "Yes, ma'am," he said, and it sounded like a vow. And if a vow is a thing you can lay on top of an order and make a bridge, then perhaps that is what men are for. He left. Ahsoka sat down before her body reminded her she had won by making her do it less gracefully. Koska gave her water. Bo-Katan stood at the door and listened to the gunship's engine shift note in the square. There were not screams. Not yet. There was the sound of men trying to remember how to walk without hurting the ground. In the palace, Maul smiled. It was not a kind smile, and not a smile any god would have been warmed by. It was the smile of someone who has heard the laugh in Coruscant's room turn to a cough, and knows that if you have ever been beaten, the cough is a music you can dance to. He did not send Rook Kast to start a slaughter. He did not leave the palace to throw his blade into the square. He waited until the clones began to come to the room under the east steps one by one. And then he began to think about what it would mean to have an army loyal to no one in particular, except the last voice that spoke to them kindly before the word in their bones was turned off like a siren silenced with a thumb. Bo-Katan saw the shape of his thought as if it had been scrawled on the wall. She left Ahsoka in the room with the medic and Koska, and the sergeant and the second man whose hands stopped shaking after the chip's song went quiet. She went to find Maul, who had moved to a smaller room, a place where the floor had marks in it that meant someone had practiced there a very long time ago and worn their practice into the stone. "You will not take my city's men out of their uniforms," she said. "You will not use their shock like a net." "I would be a fool not to," he said. There was no malice in it. There was a mathematician's mildness. "They will be loyal to whoever frees them. They will be loyal to each other," Bo-Katan said. "And to the person who did not make them choose between their souls and their commanders, while they were still groggy from being born again. That person is not you. You have too many people to love," Maul said. "It will get you killed." "I am already dead," Bo-Katan said. "Every morning I get up and choose which ghost to carry. I choose the ones who are useful." He looked at her for a long quiet and nodded once, as if acknowledging a colleague's thesis. "Very well," he said. "Keep your clones. Keep your city. Keep your treaty. I will keep my eyes open. Do not blink," she said. "A blink is a lifetime tonight." The work became a rhythm. Kicker returned with lift, then gyro, then another, then another. Ahsoka's hands moved like a woman drawing a thread through a cloth she could not see, feeling by the drag when the needle had found what it was supposed to find. The medic worked like a man translating between two languages no one had written dictionaries for. Bo-Katan stood at the door until the muscles between her shoulder blades ached and then stood some more. Ursa Wren took the second shift and did not bother to hide the tears when a clone whose name was Hatch, because his nose had been broken on a hatch, and he had decided to own it, gasped like a baby, and then laughed the laugh that is only a sound when you are ashamed of calling it a prayer. They did not get them all. The gunship went cold when too many men were missing from its manifest, and someone up in the blockade ships asked a question with a very flat voice. A second gunship was sent with men who did not have names, only numbers that had been worn smooth by use, until they were nothing but function. Those men landed in the square and moved with the elegance of a storm, asking the politeness of a land before it removes a house. Kicker met them and saluted and said a sentence that would look very impressive when written up later and meant essentially, "We have this handled, you can go home." They did not go home. There were shots in the far quadrant near the transit spire. There were not screams because men and women in this city had gained and lost the habit of screaming too many times to trust it now. Bo-Katan sent Casca with a squad and did not go herself because that is command. Ahsoka wanted to go and did not because men in the room under the east steps were still arriving with hands shaking around the edges. Maul remained still. Rook Cast stood with her toes at the line of a shadow and held her weapon low and did not bother lying to herself about what she wanted to do. Casca returned with a body. It was small for a body in armor. She laid it on the table in the room under the east steps and took her helmet off and cried the clean tears of a soldier who had done the right thing and still had blood in the angle where her jaw met her neck. Ahsoka put her hand on Casca's shoulder and did not say the word comfort, because comfort makes a mess if you let it out at the wrong time. "We got 3, Casca said. They saw the 4th move and moved with him. He shot a shopkeeper. I shot him. He was a child. I have shot children before, but not these ones. I do not like learning a new version of that sentence." Then, the medic closed the clone's eyes and tried to leave the lids down, but the lids of the dead like to open, and it takes a particular kind of love to keep them shut. Ursa Wren did it without ceremony. Bo-Katan stood at the head of the table and looked at the boy until she had given him a name that had nothing to do with the word child or the word clone. Then she went out into the hall and stood against the wall and slid down it to sit with her knees up and her elbows braced. Because if you do not find a sitting angle at some point after you kill a child in your city for the right reasons, your body will choose an angle for you later and you will not like it. Ahsoka came and sat beside her. The two of them breathed for a while. A gunship left the ground and did not come back. The blockade tightened and then loosened, a fish tested by a hand and not yet put in a bucket. The word that had gone out across the galaxy continued to do its work, but in this one room, under the east steps, the word was being taught to shut up. "They will call this a coup," Ahsoka said eventually. "They will say you have armed clones to your purpose." "Let them say it," Bo-Katan said. "It is not the worst sentence people have put my name into." "They will ask who leads this city," Ahsoka said. "They will expect a man to step forward, or, if a woman, a saint, taught you." "They can expect," Bo-Katan said. "I will give them a roof. They can put whatever name they like on it until the rain stops. Then, end. Maul will not stay," Ahsoka said, not pitying, not warning, stating a thing that had the dignity of stone. "He will smell the center like a beast that hunts heat. He will go toward Coruscant or away from it, depending on how much he wants to be the hand and how much the knife. He will leave you with the chair and the blade and the city and the clones you have freed and the ones you did not. He will leave you with the men who worship him, because he is a thing that made the air taste like an argument, shaped like a promise." "Benderanda Maul. I do not need him to stay," Bo-Katan said. "I need him to not tear my house down on his way out." "Will he do you the courtesy of leaving by a door?" Ahsoka asked. "No," Bo-Katan said. "But he will make a hole clean enough that we can fit a window in it later." They sat until the clock that is not a clock, but a cycle of breathing permitted them to stand. They went back in. Kicker brought another man. Ahsoka put her hand to another brow. Ursa wrapped the dead boy in a cloth and sent him up the service lift that had learned to be quiet. Rook Cast came to the door and did not enter and stood exactly where Bo-Katan could see her and exactly where she could leave quickly. Gar Saxon did not appear. He had found a place to stand where the story would make him brave when he told it later and was practicing his lines. The day turned, as all days do, toward a finish no one would call an ending. The blockade shifted again. The Admiral sent a message with too many numbers in it and looked as if he were trying to hold in his hands a flood that did not respect hands. The council met in a hasty cluster and voted to make the prison's medical room larger by cannibalizing a sector office that had once housed 6 men who did not know how to do anything but deny requests. The forges slowed for an hour because the men there wanted to hear the music under the east steps and could not hear it unless they stopped stamping their own. The desert outside the dome lay indifferent and precise and old. Near sunset, Maul disappeared. He did not leave a note. He did not give Bo-Katan the professional courtesy of a farewell. He took the darksaber because that is what you do when you leave a house where a blade has sung its old stubborn song. He left Rook cast, which was either a tribute or a kindness or an insult, depending on which sentence you wanted to write later. He went by a duct he had mapped the first day he stood in the palace, because men like him map ducts the way children count stairs. He went toward a ship that did not belong to him, and into a sky that did not want him, and took both as if the world owed him a left turn whenever he needed it. Rook watched him go. She did not follow. She stood on the balcony and watched the point of light that was a ship making a line that would be written on someone else's map, and then erased later. She turned and went down and found Bo-Katan in the room with the men and the medic and the woman who had made herself into a machine for mercy. "He is gone," Rook said. "I know," Bo-Katan said, not looking up. She had a hand on Kicker's forearm as the surgeon's tone made the sound it made when a circuit had been interrupted. "We will be here in the morning. Make sure the palace is still standing for us to walk through." Rook inclined her head. She did not say the sentence making itself in the back of her mind, which was a sentence like allegiance, and not like the other words she had used for all the other men who had taught her to aim and shoot. She went out and began to turn the palace into a place where, if you needed to run, you would know which way to go without having to ask the walls. In the night, Ahsoka fell asleep sitting in a chair with her hand still in the air without touching anyone, and dreamed of a room at Coruscant where a man held up a choice and called it destiny. Bo-Katan walked the corridors with bare feet because she wanted to remember the floor as something other than a thing one conquers. Kicker slept with his helmet beside him, like a dog that would not bite tonight. The Admiral did not sleep. The elder with the dry well eyes slept and dreamed of a day when someone would put a name back in his mouth, and it would not taste like failure. Ursa Wren lay with her hand on her husband's chest, and did not count his breaths, because that is the kind of love too cruel to practice on the living. Dawn came and did not look like mercy, but it did not look like murder either, and that is sometimes the place where history will let you stand for a while. Bo-Katan went up to the walkway and put her palm on the glass, and left a print warmer than the dome light. Ahsoka joined her and said nothing and everything in the way 2 women can, when words would only insult what has already been done. There were still clones who had not come to the room under the east steps. There were still men on the blockade making polite patrols into a sky that did not bite them yet. There were still mothers waiting at the prison gates for names that would not be called today. There were still bombs in the minds of men who had slept too near sharp language for too long. There was still a chair, empty now, and a blade that had left a groove in the air that would take days to smooth. "Do you want it?" Ahsoka asked, almost casual, which made the question bearable. "The chair." Bo-Katan did not lie to her. "I want the roof," she said. "The chair is a kind of tool. Today it is the wrong one. Tomorrow it may be the right one. I will not sit in anything I cannot stand up from without permission." Satine would have liked the first half of that sentence, Ahsoka said. She would have argued about the second until you were both late to the next meeting. Bo-Katan let the laugh out, because it had nowhere else to go that wouldn't do damage. "She would have," she said. "I miss her in very specific places. In others, I am glad she is not here to see what love looks like when you take the shine off it." Then now. They stood until the city below them began to stretch in the way cities stretch when they mean to work. Bo-Katan put her helmet on. Ahsoka left hers off because the helmet she had once worn had not fit her head right since she'd learned she wasn't a thing anyone else could name. They went down together. Gar Saxon came to the council chamber late and took the seat he preferred, and did not meet Bo-Katan's eyes, because he had the good sense not to, at least for this hour. Almec arrived with a sheaf of papers, and the look of a man who intended to be helpful, and therefore dangerous, because helpfulness, in his hands, always had a string tied to it. Ursa brought a plate with slices of something that had been pickled before the war, and had survived because a woman had decided that feeding people salty, sour things was a way to give them a mouth that would not lies taste sweet. Kicker stood in the doorway like a man who understood that rooms are weapons. "We have freed 18, Ahsoka said. Her voice did the work of being a weapon and a lullaby at once. "There are more. I can go until I fall down. I would prefer not to fall down yet." "You won't," Bo-Katan said. "We will bring them to you one by one. We will make a list of the men who did not come because their commanders kept them too close like a secret. We will keep those names. We will be polite in a way that teaches people to be careful with us." "And Maul?" Almec said, too smooth. "He has left," Bo-Katan said, and because she understood that words are instruments, she added, "He has left because he is a coward." Ursa's head snapped, the barest motion of a woman who had reason to admire a certain postage stamp of truth. Ahsoka said nothing, but the corner of her mouth did the thing it does when she decides the world will be kinder if she does not correct it. "He will be back," Saxon said, too eager. "Then we will do him the courtesy of being stronger when he arrives," Bo-Katan said. "And we will not make him a god while he is gone by speaking his name too often." They moved through the day, with the steady grace of men and women, who had learned that speed is not always the difference between life and death. That sometimes it is rhythm, sometimes mercy, sometimes the patience to let a thing that is thrashing tire itself out before you throw the rope. Ahsoka worked. Bo-Katan spoke and listened and scolded and praised, which are all ways to make a city remember its own grammar. The clones began to walk differently. You can tell when a man has had a sentence taken out of him. He stands a fraction taller, as if the word had been pressing down on the space between his shoulder blades for years. Kicker smiled once and immediately looked ashamed of it, and then looked proud of the shame, and then became hungry, because joy does that to you when you aren't used to it. Toward evening, a message bled through the blockade with the peculiar permission of someone who still knew where the old wires were. Ahsoka took it. She stood in the corridor alone, the light making her eyes larger than comfort. When the message ended, she leaned her head against the wall and did not move for a count of 30. Then she went and found Bo-Katan. "It has happened," she said. Bo-Katan did not ask which of the it's. There are days when the universe lets you pretend there are only one or two. There are days when the word is a mouth with 100 tongues. She simply laid a hand on Ahsoka's forearm and said, "Who did we lose?" "Everyone," Ahsoka said, very softly, which is the way you say a word like that if you want to survive saying it. "Not in body. Not all. But the Order. The Temple. The children. The masters. The old. The ones who had finally learned to sleep again. They are dead or hunted. The clones everywhere else did the thing we kept from happening here. Now." Bo-Katan closed her eyes and saw Satine's hair floating again and hated her own mind for how it uses the same images for everything. "And Skywalker?" she asked. "Because you ask the largest question when you want to test the ceiling." Ahsoka did not answer at once. "He is not dead," she said finally. "That is the only sentence I trust enough to say out loud. Kenobi is not dead. That is the second. The third is that the man in the Chancellor's chair has put on his second face in public." "The Empire," Bo-Katan said, tasting the new word and finding it both old and cheap. "Yes," Ahsoka said. "He is calling it safety. He is calling it clarity. He is calling it the end of a war that he chose to make, while he rode away to win it with his other hand." Bo-Katan leaned her shoulder against the wall. The wall was very polite about bearing her weight. "Then we are what we told ourselves we were," she said. "A city under a dome with a knife, a treaty, and people who expect to eat in the morning." "They will come," Ahsoka said. "Not the Republic, the Empire. They will want what they have always wanted. They will want to write your name for you. Then they will learn where we keep our pens," Bo-Katan said. "And how sharp we prefer them." Ahsoka's laugh was a small damaged thing that still knew how to be a laugh. "I will have to go," she said after a time. "Not now. Not tonight." Not while this is still a room where a man can become himself again on a table under the east steps. But soon. I cannot draw a saber I do not carry anyway. But I can be a pair of hands where there are none. I can be a voice that remembers the right grammar. I can be a roof somewhere that has forgotten the word. Damn. I did not expect you to stay, Bo-Katan said. I only needed you long enough to make this place a fact that cannot be denied with a sentence. Ahsoka took Bo-Katan's head in her hands without asking, because sometimes you do a thing that could get you killed in many rooms, and trust this one to be different. She pressed her forehead to Bo-Katan's and let her eyes close. The view through the dome shifted very slightly. A child's handprint from 100 years ago lined up with the space between two new buildings. Do not become a saint, Ahsoka said. They can kill saints. Or worse, they can put them on coins. I have always been too profane for that, Bo-Katan said. They separated. They did the smaller thing of walking side by side through a corridor that had probably been designed for men to stride down, and they made it fit them. At the door of the room under the east steps, Ahsoka paused. Inside, Kicker was laughing again at something Casca had said that wasn't funny. The medic was telling Ursa to sit down before she fell down. Be careful with your roof, Ahsoka said. Be careful with your sky, Bo-Katan said. Ahsoka went out into the square with a hood that did not hide what she was, and walked into the city the way a woman will when she can't quite bear to leave and knows the leaving must be done anyway. Bo-Katan watched until Ahsoka became one more piece of dark that belongs to a city at night. She did not follow. She went back inside. They do not write ballads about the next days. Even in Mandalore, where the old poets loved their swords and sometimes remembered to love the men who swung them, no one makes long songs about lists and schedules and food and making sure the boy who burned his fingers doesn't put his hand into the wrong machine a second time. But this is the weather cities are made from. Bo-Katan rose and lay down and rose. She fought and did not fight. She attended to the small corruptions that grow on the undersides of good intentions and scraped them away with the administrative equivalent of a dull knife. She convened the council and made them argue until the arguments wore themselves out on the fact of one more vote. She visited the prisons and counted names, and made new ones for the men who wanted to be more than numbers. She spoke to the admiral and taught him to use the word Mandalore without stumbling on the last syllable, because it is heavier than it looks. Kicker and the men he had brought with him moved through the city with weapons facing down. They wore their helmets less. Children learned their names and shouted them, as if the names were the solution to a riddle. The blockade altered its posture, never so lax that you'd think it had forgotten how to do the other posture, never so tight that you'd think it wasn't bound by a good man's promise to try decency one more day. Rook Cast became a shape Bo-Katan could depend on without pretending it was love. Trust has forms other than the kind that wears flowers. Rook could be in 3 places at once, when a corridor needed to be kept clear, and a window needed to be opened, and a man in a hallway needed to be told that the thing he was about to do would make his wife a widow. She never spoke a word Satine would have approved of in a classroom. She never needed to. Gar Saxon waited. That is a kind of work too, and he did it as well as he could. He gathered men who liked their names hard and their meals soft. He paid for information with lapel pins. He chose a window worth looking out of. He stood in it and told himself he could see how the story would go. He was wrong and did not know it yet. And that is a mercy you owe even to your enemies, letting them be wrong for a while. The Empire announced itself properly 6 days after the word that changed the clones' bones. It did not need to. Everyone could smell it. But it did. And that is the kind of politeness empires enjoy. The Admiral's face was tight with a new discipline. He used the new word with the steady neatness of someone who intends to survive teaching his mouth the thing it is now meant to shape. Lady Kryze, he said, on behalf of the Emperor, I ask that you recognize the new order and permit a garrison to protect the integrity of your world. On behalf of Mandalore, Bo-Katan said, I recognize that your Emperor has placed his hand on the lever he built and is enjoying the sound it makes when the galaxy moves. I recognize that, for the moment, this hand is stronger than any one of our fingers. I do not recognize your garrison. We have our own integrity. We do not need it protected against itself. The Admiral's mouth did a small thing, it had not been trained to do. "If we come," he said, and the voice was flat as a coin, "we will not ask." "If you come," Bo-Katan said, "you will find a city that has made itself ready to outlast you." He ended the transmission. He would send another. Men like him always send another, because hope is a disease that can be managed, but not cured in the kind of men who look decent in a uniform and wish to remain that way. Bo-Katan turned from the hollow and found Ursa watching her with the patient brutality of a friend who wants you to be what you are, and not what she wishes you could be to make her life easier. "Say it," Bo-Katan said. "You cannot hold this forever," Ursa said. "You might hold it for as long as it takes to teach our children the right way to run. That is not nothing." "I am not interested in forever," Bo-Katan said. "I am interested in breakfast." "Bo," Ursa said, and all the affection and all the contempt and all the belief laid their hands on the name at once. "Ursa," Bo-Katan said back with equal force, and then they both looked away because you can only look at something that large for so long without burning your eyes. The nights that followed were busy with work that never wants to be named. The day that followed those nights brought Boy to the palace steps, who had walked from the far dome with a letter in his pocket. The letter said, in a woman's hand that had left flour on the edge of the paper, that the forge in Keldabi had learned to sing again, and that the rhythm was good, and that the men there wanted to send a gift, which was to say they wanted to be counted. Bo-Katan held the paper like a thin blade and felt the way it cut, and did not bleed, because some cuts make you stand taller. Ahsoka was gone by then, the way women like her go. Not with a parade, not with a note, simply absence where a presence had been useful and would be again. Kicker asked after her once, and then did not again, because you do not say a thing more than once, if saying it doesn't change the world, and you still want the world to respect you. Maul was a rumor again. He would put his hand on this planet, and that, and leave a print you could measure in the number of names said at a burial. He would fail to catch the hinge, and would tell himself he had succeeded because men like him cannot survive admitting they have been made into the wrong kind of instrument by a boy with a laugh too eager to be safe. He would be both absent and everywhere. He would not be here, and that made all the difference in the only room Bo-Katan had time to keep clean. Bo-Katan walked her city with her helmet under her arm and her knives where they belonged and her words in her mouth like tools. You keep clean enough that they reflect your face when you lift them. She spoke to children with the kind of respect that says someday you will shoot at me, and I am willing to pay attention to you now, so you do not choose the wrong direction when you do. She spoke to old men with a tenderness she would never name because they had seen too many roofs built and fallen to tolerate naming. She spoke to Ursa like a woman who knows exactly which cuts her friend is willing to make and how to knit them when they are done. She spoke to Rook the way a commander speaks to someone who is learning the difference between loyalty to a man and loyalty to a place. In the room under the east steps, the medic had begun to keep a box with clean cloths and a small piece of something sweet the clones could put in their mouths after their bones had been taught silence again. Kicker stole two one day and gave one to a child who'd been watching from the doorway. The child made a face as if sweetness were an insult, and then asked for another, which is the correct etiquette for candy and mercy. At the edge of the dome, the desert watched. It does not care for empires. It measures only the wind and the patience of those who walk across it. It heard the small echo of gunships in the upper air and decided to remain itself. It is a good teacher. It does not flatter. One evening, very late, Bo-Katan climbed to the highest place she could reach without breaking a lock she had placed herself. She took off her helmet and placed it beside her like a companion that knows when it is not needed. She sat with her legs out and her hands around her knees and watched the stars make their various ancient lies. She thought of her sister one more time and then carefully set the thought down where it could not trip her on her way out of the room. A day will come. She said aloud because the dome likes to be spoken to and rewards honesty with echoes. When I will sit in that chair and tell this city to do a thing, and it will do it because it believes me. A day will come when I will sit in that chair and tell this city to do a thing, and it will do it because it is tired and wants breakfast, and does not care who asks. I will try to arrange for the first to come before the second. I will fail in precise ways and succeed in others. And when the Empire comes and puts its hands on my walls, I will have taught enough children the right way to run that the city will live in the bodies that leave it. Menderso. She fell silent. The dome held the quiet. Below, in the room under the east steps, Kicker dreamed of a beach he had never seen. Ursa dreamed of a daughter who would one day carry paint and bombs as if both were forms of love. Rook dreamed of a ladder that no longer ended at a man. Gar Saxon dreamed of applause. The Admiral dreamed of a day when he would not have to choose between orders and the man he wanted to be, and woke bitter because he knew that day was not on any calendar. Ahsoka, somewhere not under this dome, did not sleep and felt the Force like a river moving through a city that had learned how to be both brave and tired without confusing the two. The next morning, Bo-Katan stood before the council and taught them a new word. It was not big. It did not end wars. It did not make men bend their heads without understanding why. It was a word that had to do with the rate at which food is distributed so that none of it spoils and no one is without. She wrote it in the room, the way a blacksmith writes heat into metal, by holding it there long enough that the shape begins to exist. Saxon did not like the word. Almec tried to tie a string to it. Ursa sharpened it and placed it in the drawer where tools go when they are going to be used often. Kicker repeated it under his breath, as if it were a prayer that even a soldier could stomach. Rook leaned back against the wall and let her helmet rest against the stone, and let the new word find a place in the part of her mind that had room for something other than killing now. In the square, the statue's shadows pointed at the steps where a gunship had set down, as if to say, we remember, and we will tell the grandchildren, and their grandchildren will decide whether to be bored by it or to make it a song. In the forge, the boy who had burned his fingers did not burn them today. He tied a knot to secure a bundle and showed a girl how to tie it, and she laughed and did it better, and he pretended to be offended because that is how a city teaches itself to be a better city. Bo-Katan went to the windowed rim at midday. She pressed her palm to the glass. The desert beyond reflected the light back in a sheet that made her eyes narrow and then widen. The way your eyes do when you walk into a story you have written for yourself and discover someone else has added a scene. She did not know how long this roof would hold. She did not know which day the Empire would stop being polite and start being itself publicly. She did not know who she would have to shoot to keep a boy from being called a man in the wrong way. She knew how to stand. She knew how to be a scaffolding. She knew the difference between a saint and a woman and the price each pays in different currencies. She knew the sound of the forges, and she knew how long a man can hold his breath in a room under the east steps, while another person teaches his bones silence. She knew how to say Maul's name without making him a god. She knew how to make a treaty into a habit, and a habit into a law, and a law into a thing with a handle you can hold on a bad day. She did not know how to be loved by a city that had lost the habit of loving its rulers. She would learn, or she would die trying, and she was not sure which ending would be better. She suspected the city would make that decision for her. Work. She said aloud to the dome, to the empty room, to her own body. We have bought it. We will spend it. The dome did not answer, because it is not a poet. It keeps weather out. It keeps air in. It knows how to be a roof. Bo-Katan turned and walked back into the halls where men and women waited with lists and knives, and the too rare ability to laugh when something tender and ridiculous happened in the middle of a day that could have been much worse. She walked toward the chair and did not sit. She walked past it and down into the city. She would sit when sitting mattered. She would don the helmet when the light was wrong. She would throw the knife when words failed. She would lift the word when knives would ruin the day. She would be Bo-Katan Kryze because no one else could be that woman and keep this roof in place in this hour with these people and this much dust in the fine weave of the air. For now, the forges sang. For now, the square was a place where a man could be freed from an order with his head still on his shoulders. For now, the desert watched and remained old. For now, the Empire was a ring in the sky that had not yet learned the art of fitting its hand inside a dome without breaking it. For now, The word treaty still tasted like iron and hope, and the bitter tang of a compromise that does not rot the teeth immediately. For now, Bo-Katan walked, and the city moved with her. And in the places where it did not, she learned where to stand, and the where to stand is a kind of map that, if you are very lucky, you give to your enemies when they come, and they mistake it for decoration, and you smile, and you let them hang their pictures on it while you go on building the house.